For an entire year, the dog sat in front of one door, through heat that cracked the pavement, through rain that soaked his fur to the skin, through nights so cold the porch boards froze solid beneath him. He never barked. He never wandered far. He never stopped watching the door. Everyone in the neighborhood said the same thing. The soldier who lived there isn't coming back. But the dog didn't listen. And then one night, someone knocked. Maple Street in Grayson Creek, Texas, is the kind of place where people still wave from their driveways and American flags hang from every porch. House number 27 used to be one of the loudest homes on the block. Music on weekends. Laughter in the yard. A father teaching his daughter how to ride a bike in the street while neighbors cheered her on. That was before the knock came the first time. 2 officers in dress uniforms. A folded flag. Words that sounded official, but shattered everything. After that day, 9-year-old Macy Collins stopped speaking. Not slowly, not gradually. She just didn't. Her teachers tried, counselors tried. Her mother cried behind closed doors. But Macy's voice stayed locked somewhere deep inside her chest, like it had gone missing along with her father. The house became unbearably quiet. The television stayed on low. Dishes were washed without clatter. Even the wind outside sounded louder than anything inside those walls. And then, about a week later, the dog appeared. No one saw where he came from. One morning he was simply there, sitting at the bottom of the porch steps, facing the front door like he'd been assigned to guard it. He was large, ash gray with a darker stripe running down his back, ribs slightly visible beneath his coat, but posture straight, alert. Not a stray that wandered aimlessly. Not a pet that got lost and panicked. He looked like he was on duty. Neighbors tried to coax him away. They left food on the sidewalk. He ignored it unless it was placed near the Collins porch. Animal control was called once, but when they approached, the dog moved just far enough to avoid capture, only to return to the same exact spot an hour later, always facing the door. Macy first noticed him from behind the living room curtains. He wasn't scratching, wasn't whining, just watching. She started watching too. Every morning before school, he would already be there. Every afternoon, same position. At night, he circled once and lay down directly in front of the door, as if guarding it from something unseen. 3 days passed before Macy stepped outside. She carried half a peanut butter sandwich on a napkin. Her mother watched from inside but said nothing. The dog didn't rush toward the food. Instead, he slowly stood, walked up the steps, and stopped right in front of Macy. Close enough that she could see the faint scar along his muzzle. Close enough to see intelligence in his eyes, steady, searching. He didn't look at the sandwich. He looked at her, and then gently, he lowered himself and rested his head against her knee. Macy froze. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then, very slowly, she placed her hand on his head. It was the first time since the funeral that she had touched something without pulling away. From that day on, the dog stayed. Her mother finally put out a bowl of water. A blanket appeared on the porch. The neighbors stopped questioning it. It was as if everyone silently agreed. The dog belonged there. Macy named him Ash because his fur looked like the remains of something that had burned. Ash began walking her to the school bus stop every morning. He didn't run ahead, didn't lag behind. He matched her pace exactly, like he had done it 1,000 times before. When the bus arrived, he sat down and waited until it drove away. In the afternoon, he was there before she stepped off the bus. But even when he walked with her, even when he lay beside her at night under the window, he always looked back at the door, waiting. One evening, a thunderstorm rolled through Grayson Creek. Rain pounded the roof. Wind shook the shutters. Macy stood at the window watching Ash outside on the porch. Her mother tried to call him in, but he wouldn't cross the threshold. He stayed exactly where he always stayed, facing the door. Lightning flashed. For just a split second, the light illuminated something on his collar, something worn and scratched, almost faded beyond recognition. Macy pressed her hand against the glass. The dog didn't flinch at the thunder. He didn't seek shelter. He was guarding something or someone, and deep down, in a place she hadn't allowed herself to feel in months, Macy sensed something impossible. Ash wasn't just waiting. He was expecting, and somewhere far beyond Maple Street, a man who had been declared gone was fighting his way back home. The storm passed, but Ash didn't move from the porch until morning. When Macy stepped outside before school, she noticed something she hadn't seen before. The metal tag on his collar wasn't decorative. It wasn't a city registration tag. It was military, scratched, bent, faded, but still there. She knelt down carefully and turned it over. The engraving was barely readable. Ranger. Her breath caught. She didn't speak. She hadn't spoken in months, but her fingers tightened in his fur. Ranger. That name lived somewhere in the house. That afternoon, while her mother was sorting through boxes in the garage, Macy wandered in. Dust floated in the light beams coming through the open door. Cardboard boxes labeled Deployment and Keep and Don't Touch were stacked along the wall. One box had fallen open. Inside were photographs. She picked one up. Her father stood in uniform, desert sun behind him, arm wrapped around a large ash-gray military working dog. The dog's ears were alert. His stance, confident, loyal, protective, and the collar, the same collar. On the back of the photo, written in black marker, "Me and Ranger. Best partner I ever had." Macy's heart began to pound so hard she could hear it. Her mother noticed her holding the picture. For a moment she hesitated, then she walked over slowly and sat beside her daughter on the garage floor. "That was Ranger," she said quietly, "your dad's canine partner." Her voice softened. They saved each other more times than I'll ever know. Macy looked up. Her mother continued, staring somewhere far away. "During the last operation, there was an explosion. Your dad was evacuated. Ranger disappeared in the chaos. They searched, but..." She swallowed. "They couldn't find him." Silence filled the garage. Outside, on the porch, Ash sat facing the door. Macy stood up suddenly and ran to the front window. The dog hadn't moved. She stepped outside slowly. He turned his head the moment she said it. "Ranger." The word barely left her lips. It was cracked, fragile, like glass. But it was sound, real sound. The dog froze. His ears lifted, his body stiffened, not in fear, but recognition. He stood and walked straight to the door, sat down, and stared at it. That night, something shifted in the air. Macy didn't go to bed. She sat cross-legged by the front window, watching Ranger. Her mother pretended not to notice the tears sliding down her own cheeks. Around 11:47 p.m., headlights turned onto Maple Street. Late. Too late for visitors. The vehicle slowed, stopped in front of number 27. Ranger stood instantly, not barking, not pacing, still, focused. The engine cut off. A truck door opened, boots on gravel, heavy, slow, deliberate. Macy's pulse thundered in her ears. Her mother stepped into the hallway, another step on the porch. The wood creaked. Ranger didn't wag his tail. He didn't whine. He simply waited. A knock, strong, certain, not hesitant like sympathy, not gentle like neighbors. It was the kind of knock that belonged to someone who had every right to be there. Macy felt something inside her chest unlock. Her mother's hand trembled as she reached for the doorknob. She hesitated. Another knock, softer this time, and then a voice, low, rough, familiar. "Emily?" Macy stopped breathing. Her mother's knees nearly gave out. The door opened, and standing under the porch light was a man thinner than she remembered, a scar across his eyebrow, beard grown out, eyes tired but alive. Ranger moved first. He lunged forward and collided into the man's chest, knocking him back against the porch railing. The man dropped his duffel bag and fell to his knees, arms wrapping instinctively around the dog. "Ranger," he breathed, voice breaking. "You found them." Macy stepped forward slowly. Her father looked up, and for a split second, none of them moved, as if the universe needed confirmation. "Daddy?" she whispered. It wasn't loud, but it was clear, and it shattered the year of silence in a single word. He opened his arms, and this time, when she ran into them, he held on like he would never let go again. Behind them, Ranger finally wagged his tail, not because he was excited, but because his mission was complete. And for the first time in a year, he stopped looking at the door. For a long moment, none of them spoke. They just held each other on that porch while the Texas night wrapped around them. Emily was the first to find her voice. "They told us," she started, but couldn't finish. "I know," he said softly. His voice was rough, like it hadn't been used in a while. "There was an explosion. The evacuation was chaos. I was unconscious when they pulled me out. My ID was damaged. Records got mixed during transfer. By the time I woke up, they thought I was someone else." He looked down at Macy, brushing hair from her face. "It took months to straighten it out. Surgeries, physical therapy, closed investigation. I wasn't allowed to contact anyone until it was cleared." Emily shook her head in disbelief. "We had a service. We buried an empty casket." His jaw tightened. "I know." Silence again. But this silence wasn't empty. It was rebuilding. He looked toward Ranger, who now stood between them, eyes alert but calm. "When the blast hit," he continued, "Ranger shoved me behind a barrier, took the worst of it. When I came to, he was gone. They told me they couldn't find him." Ranger's ears twitched at the sound of his name. "I searched every list I could once I recovered. Every transfer report, every K-9 relocation unit." He swallowed. "Nothing." Emily covered her mouth. "And then," he said quietly, 3 weeks ago, one of the guys from my unit called me. Said there'd been reports of a gray military dog spotted near civilian routes, heading north, like he had somewhere to be." He let out a breath that sounded half laugh, half sob. "I told them, if it's him, he knows where home is." Macy looked at Ranger all this time, the door, the waiting, the storms. He hadn't been guarding the house. He'd been holding it together. Inside the house felt different that night. Warmer, louder, real. Macy didn't let go of her father's sleeve even when they stepped into the living room. She kept touching his arm like she was afraid he might disappear again if she blinked too long. He knelt in front of her. "Hey," he said gently. "I heard you." She blinked when you said my name. Her throat tightened. "I tried," she whispered, but the words wouldn't come. "They don't have to," he said. "I'm here now." Ranger walked in slowly, scanning the room once like he was clearing it. Old habit. Then he lay down near the couch, not by the door, not by the window, near them. For the first time in a year, he closed his eyes without snapping them back open at every small noise. The next morning, Maple Street woke up to something it hadn't seen in months. Laughter. Real, unrestrained laughter. Neighbors peeked through blinds when they saw the familiar truck parked outside number 27. Within hours, word spread through Grayson Creek like wildfire. He's back. People brought casseroles, handshakes, tears, apologies for the sympathy they once gave. At the small-town ceremony 2 weeks later, the mayor stood on a temporary stage outside the school gym. Flags lined the sidewalk. Children held handmade signs that read, "Welcome home." Sergeant Daniel Collins stood taller than he had the night he returned. Beside him sat Ranger, freshly groomed, wearing a new collar engraved with 2 words, "Still on duty." When Daniel was handed the microphone, he hesitated. "I was trained to believe no soldier gets left behind," he began. "Turns out, that goes both ways." Soft laughter moved through the crowd. I survived because I knew I had something to come home to. But this dog... He paused, looking down at Ranger. This dog didn't just wait. He made sure my family wasn't alone. He stepped back, then surprised everyone by handing the microphone to Macy. A year ago, that would have been impossible. Now she stepped forward. Her hands trembled, but her voice didn't. "He sat at our door every day," she said, "even when everyone told us Dad wasn't coming back." She looked at Ranger. He knew something we didn't. The crowd was completely silent, and he was right. Applause broke like a wave. Ranger didn't react to the noise. He simply leaned slightly into Daniel's leg. Steady, grounded, home. That night, after the town quieted and the house finally emptied of visitors, Daniel walked onto the porch. Ranger followed. They stood there together for a moment, looking at the street. "You did good, partner," Daniel said softly. Ranger glanced up at him. Then, instead of sitting to watch the door, he turned and walked back inside, because there was nothing left to guard. The door didn't need watching anymore. It needed living behind it. And inside that house on Maple Street, for the first time in a year, every light stayed on a little longer. Not out of fear, but out of gratitude. Some promises break under pressure. Some fade with time. But some are carried across oceans, through fire, through paperwork and pain, through silence, and sometimes all the way back to the front door.